To LICHTUNDFIRE. My name is Curcio. I'm the director of LICHTUNDFIRE, and we are here talking to Robert Curcio in a minute, but also to celebrate the show with 57 artists. Robert Curcio curated into this show, and what connects them all is their kind of connection to Robert, whether it is very personal or professional or both. And so we will talk about it at length, I think, during our conversation. And in the meantime, I would like to first introduce Robert to all of you, especially who haven't known him so long. And the exhibition is called In It for the Long Haul. Of course, that's the appropriate title, with 57 artists and serving a 30-plus year career of a curator and artwork professional. So I'm introducing with this Robert Curcio. Robert Curcio of Curcio Projects has been involved in the international contemporary art world since the early 1990s. He formed Curcio Projects in 2001 as an umbrella organization for his various art projects, including curation, exhibition and artist management, PR and media, writing, art fair consulting, gallery development, and advising collectors. He has curated and/or managed well over 30 exhibitions, including Mortality, a survey of contemporary death art with Donald Cuthbert, and numerous exhibitions at LICHTUNDFIRE recently, including When Night Falls, Reshuffle, and Presence with Curcio. Other recent exhibitions include A Days of Roses at the Kips, New York, and Tales of Adjusted Desire at Robert Barry Gallery Online. Curcio was a co-founder and co-producer of the Scope art shows and has consulted with the art fairs Asia Contemporary Art Show, Context, Art Southampton, and Pinter Art Fair, I must say, to name a few. He has written for Art Accuse, Art Voices, Art News, Cover, Dart International, Sculpture, Tema Celeste, White Hot Magazine, and Zing magazines. Originally earning a degree from Tyler School of Art and exhibiting for a few years as an artist himself until deciding to stop making art in the early 1990s while as director of Ward's Nasser Gallery in Soho. Many people, I think, remember that. I will be in conversation, moderator feels exaggerated in that setting, but I will be in conversation with Robert. And I'm originally from Germany. I've been living and working in New York City for the past 30 plus years also. I'm the co-founder and director of LICHTUNDFIRE since its inception in 2015 on 175 Rivington Street. Curcio has been working as a gallery director, independent curator, and art consultant since the mid-1990s in New York City and was part of the first NADA, New York Art Dealers Alliance generation from its formation in the early 2000s. At the same time as she was a gallery director in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Before relocating to New York City, she studied humanities at the Free University in West Berlin from 1985 to 1991. In writing, she is currently developing the concept of the intuitive memoir. We can talk about this another time. And with that, having said this, I would like to introduce Robert Curcio one more time to all of you. And he can start. Robert. And having said this, and maybe some of you know also, Robert, I have never met you or experienced you as an artist, even though we've been knowing each other for almost 2.5 decades. Because that was obviously a few years before, when you were active as an artist. So I'm interested in, and probably not the only one here, about your beginnings as an artist, actually, not just your career as an artist. What made you decide to become an artist in the first place?
That was just family, especially my dad. He was a weekend painter, but also dealt with, he was a construction installator, and he always brought home these big blueprints. And I got interested in them, which I first got interested in architecture. So that's where it all started. But also with my parents, as a kid, we were always going to the museums here. And then when I actually started to get interested in art and architecture when I was like 13 or 14, the only place they knew in the city outside of the museums was on the 57th Street, the galleries there. And that's how it all started. And then from there I got into painting and photography and doing more and more in art, and also with Neil Jenny. He was a major early influence, as I write in the press release, that his article and interview that came out in 82, I just read it and thought, this is what art should be. It was all on his bad paintings and the beginnings of his big, thick, heavy canvases, and I just loved that. It was painting in a sculpture, or was it a sculpture that was surrounding painting, or that dichotomy got me interested, and that's early on in my own art career as an artist, and that's what I was always very much interested in. What's a painting? What's a sculpture? Is it really one and the same? And at the same time, I also started going to the galleries down here in East Village in Soho, and fell in love with Robert Longo's work, all of his constructions and mixing things in. When he would have or somewhere in the exhibit, a list of everybody involved in the fabrication and whatever else, I thought that was completely amazing. And that's exactly when I graduated. My BFA exhibition was a mix of, you couldn't tell what was, you could tell what was a sculpture, what was on the wall, but you couldn't tell what was a piece. I made it purposely integrated as one big installation. That's what I did in school, and then by the time I stopped making art in 92, somewhere around there, I was making kind of paintings on glass that dealt with, I painted hunks of flesh with words, and it was all on a computer flowchart. So it was all about language, the body, following a pattern, the whole post thing of prison and what is a following system, all that was big in the 80s. And that was the last few pieces that I did.
So that was really conceptual, mixed media, conceptual, yes.
And I did it while I made the paintings as an individual piece. I saw them as part of the greater whole of an installation on a wall or even on the floor or something like that.
So that sounds really interesting, for the lack of better kind of, but I mean, my question now to you is, that sounds actually not just interesting, that sounds, I want to know more about it. I want to know this artist, Robert Curcio, but something must have changed your mind when it came to pursuing your career, or maybe it wasn't just one thing, maybe a few things.
Well, it was kind of a basic, out of necessity sort of situation. When I was still making art, I became director of Ward Massey, where I was organizing around 5 exhibits a year that had 20 or more artists in them. So I've always liked doing big exhibitions. But because it was a small non-profit organization, not only was I curating, I was doing all the press, any sales, doing all the writing, doing all the installing, taking care of if the toilet broke. So it got to be the situation where I was putting in 10, 12 days at war density, and then I would go home and maybe start painting at 10 o'clock at night for a few hours, and I just, and then I forgot whether it was one of my own exhibits or I was just out at an opening, and I had no idea who I was talking to or how to talk to them. I couldn't remember if this is an artist that I want to put in one of my shows at Ward Nancy, or is this somebody who I should be talking about my work? So I was getting very confused, and health wasn't doing any better. And then I just made the decision that I wasn't going to, I guess say it's my Marcel Duchamp move, that I'm not going to make art anymore, which I look at making exhibitions and doing everything as part of an installation and performance.
And of course, it's equally, probably one can argue equally creative.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, if you use it as such, like as a creative force or source. Yes. But so this is, wow, so that must have been also painful, no?
No, I guess I have a very pragmatic side of also. It's the same thing when I was making work. I never thought it so precious that, oh my God, it's just amazing, you can't do anything to it. I would rip up pieces or whatever and do something else with it. So for me, art, well, I've been so involved and do so much, and I think it's important and conveys things and all that, I don't see it as so precious.
So it's almost more ephemeral.
Yes.
Or it was sort of like, almost like a, ephemeral, but also that there was like maybe a performance, a performative element, also within what you mentioned performance before. Also. Yeah. Wow. So this is the first time Robert and I talk about this, by the way. We've known each other for 23, well, we're not sure how long.
20 somewhat.
Because this is like, and the other day actually it came up, someone who is an artist in the show, saying, so how long actually did you guys have been, known each other, And that happens probably to many people who know each other for a long time, probably even, partners, spouses, whatever. Both start talking at the same time and two entirely different stories. And that's kind of how it was there too. I said, I think I met you. I wasn't even sure about my own story. I wasn't sure, did I meet you when you still at the gallery or, or at the gallery, or did I really meet you, like the first scope show, we can get into this soon, and you said, no, I met you before you had your own space, and actually I met you at home. Someone brought me to your home and said, you gotta meet Priska, so that was really funny. And I have, in hindsight, I can kind of make that connection, but not before I came. So I didn't remember. Anyway, so, wow, so Robert, that's still quite a transition, I think, when an artist decides to do something else in the art world.
There's been many.
And yes, there have been many. There are obviously many artists who switch from being an artist to either owning a gallery or running a space, co-running a space. However, often they still try to juggle both.
Well, Xavier Ellis in the exhibit, I met him because he's the gallerist. And he's always doing art fairs and always organizing things. And then I was telling him, I'm putting together this show and this is what I'm doing. And he was like, I'm an artist. And I was like, I have no idea. I know you're from art fairs and I bought a piece from you and he was like, oh yeah, just go down to the other side of the art fair and go to this gallery. They have my work. Take a look. And I was like, oh. So I went, took a look. I liked it, and I was like, can I have a piece? And he was like, yes. That was it.
Good.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, he's exhibiting, he's organizing exhibitions, he's doing art fairs. He doesn't have a specific space anymore, but so he's doing all the business stuff and everything and still finding time to make art. I just didn't want to do both, that I felt that I would mess up either one or anything like that. And the funny thing is that a year or two after stopping making work, I was sitting in Tompkins, where I live, and there must have been a group of SBA students, and they were all sketching in the park. And I was like, wow, yeah, I'm gonna sketch. And I had some paper on me, and I had a pen, no pencil or anything like that, and I started sketching people or whatever, the trees, and I just thought it was god awful. And I was like, yeah.
What you did or the tree?
No. No, and I was like, the old saying is true. Once, if you don't use it, you lose it. And I hadn't done anything, made any work, or done any sketching, or anything like that in a year or two. But never mind.
Yeah. Even though before you were assembling things and, yeah. Well, was there a lot of sketching involved? What you did before?
Yes, so a lot of times I did a lot of sketching just to figure out things and just how to, the basic ideas and the color scheme and things like that, how I want things to look or where to place things.
So you really thought you lost, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, and even as an artist, I still drew and sketched from life and things like that. But just once I made that decision, that was the decision, and I stuck with it. And
so you started for many spaces before you then opened up your own space, right? I mean, because it was not so you were in the late 80s, but then your own space was more in the late 90s,
well,
right?
in the mid-90s.
Mid-90s, yes. And I feel like I've been to your space there, but obviously I didn't meet you there. Something rings a bell, but I have like some recollection.
It was a smaller storefront than this on East 5th Street.
Right. Anybody knows that? I mean, like you were there. Yes.
Pam knows it. I exhibited Pam a few times.
Right.
And actually, William Graff, who I didn't exhibit at my space, him and I were in our first exhibits in New York City in '89, which was at War Dancing. That's how him and I know each other, and it started from there.
Fifth between 1 and 1.
It was
me.
Yeah. No, first and then. Second and first.
That's what I thought. It was like the south side of the street, no?
Yeah, it was the south side of the street,
yeah.
next to the police parking lot, because the police station is there.
Well protected.
Kind of.
I know there were all the bypass, though.
No, that was the Hells Angels.
Right.
They were on second, but that was between B and C or something like that. I'm C and D. But no, actually, it wasn't. It was weird because one day, nice quiet. I think it was a spring day at the gallery. All of a sudden, this guy runs in with a gun. And he's like, sorry, I'm one of the cops. And of course, I was like, sure. And it turned out that like one of the prisoners jumped out of the car and they were chasing him or something like that and didn't know where he was. So he's like, just stay.
Stay with collectors.
Shelter in place. And
under your desk.
So I was like, okay, and then he disappeared.
By the way, did you see my drawings?
Wouldn't be surprised.
So you opened, so I understand that you worked for several places in very different capacities. Today you mentioned even only one Ruby, not a long thing, not like a mainstay of you working in a gallery, but still, of course, also gallery people know you. So it's only one Ruby is not around.
No, well, the gallery is.
Yeah.
But she is no longer.
Right. Yes. So, but then still, it's a big jump that they're the artists who don't open up their own gallery, they stop making art, and they work in the art world in another capacity. A lot of them in the gallery world, whether they do art handling or directing or curating or whatever, and but you decided to open up your own space. Mm-hmm. How did that come about?
Well, my ex-business partner was working with this artist who I thought was a very good sculptor, but he turned out to be a total pain in the ass. Actually, we were trying to get him into an exhibit at Ordinary. That was when I was still there. It was one of the last shows that I did. And I really liked the guy's sculptures, and I had picked a piece that would be hanging from the ceiling. And then for like a month beforehand, I was constantly calling this guy, calling the artist, calling his agent, saying, do you know this is the date for hanging the show? I haven't heard from you, you haven't mailed it back, anything, this, that, and the other thing. And even the agent had no idea who the hell he was, not who he was, but where he was. And then in the middle of the opening, the artist showed up and wanted to hang his piece from the ceiling. Like, hell no.
Sounds eccentric.
I don't know about eccentric. I think he had all this time to get in touch with me, but so that's how me and my former partner got to know each other by complaining about this artist.
Right.
And we just stayed in touch, and then he just said, do you want to open up a gallery? Then I was like, yeah, sure, why not?
And that is Spectre.
Mm-hmm.
Spectre who? What's his name?
Alan.
Alan Spectre.
Right?
Alan Spectre. That's someone we shouldn't be knowing.
That's the past. Yeah.
Okay. I have people like this too. But you had the gallery together for the time being you had a gallery. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That was nearly 3 years.
So that, well, no, actually, I don't want to know first what happened, why you didn't continue, but more, what did you do in the gallery? I mean, what was your program, if you had any, or I mean, like, do you have like some kind of vision or kind of goal set?
Well, at first it was just about doing it and putting things together and reaching out to new artists because I didn't use too many artists from Lord Nasty or other projects that I did in terms of exhibiting there, and it was just basic to keep the doors open and try to sell art and make things happen. Unfortunately, it was a little, it got to be more and more difficult each year because then the meat market and all the galleries there took off, and then Chelsea started, and I would be contacting all the writers and curators and critics that live down here and in the East Village and around the block from the gallery saying, come on, check out the exhibit that we have. And they'd be like, oh, no, we're going to Chelsea or the meat market. And I'd be like, you're around the block, I'll buy you lunch. Come on.
Yeah, the meat market was really hot at that time. Yeah, so why, that's actually another good question. How come you did it in the East Village and not somewhere else?
It just worked out that way. Cheap rent. Nice real estate guy to do business with. That was very nice. There was no major hassles or anything like that. So it made sense.
Yeah. Opportunity.
Yeah.
That's how we got to LICHTUNDFIRE. Yeah, same thing. Yes. But then again, I mean, the East Village was, at least for quite a while, one of the really hot place too. Even till the early...
During the mid-90s.
But then again in the early 2000s, because I remember, didn't even ATM Gallery start like this? Anybody remembers ATM Gallery? Right. There was sort of this kind of window where all of a sudden the East Village was kind of hot again for a couple of years or so.
It's
Yeah.
20-some odd galleries.
Right. But that was after you had already closed the gallery. All right. So now we must ask you, how come you closed the gallery? Or is that a sensitive kind of...
No, the usual reasons.
Yeah.
Lack of sales, lack of backing, and lack of commitment.
Which is actually not surprising at all. I wrote a little bit, like I said to Robert, I would like to talk about this and that, and then the whole thing that, having a space, a small space, no matter, you could have had it in the East Village, in the meat market, in Chelsea or elsewhere. It wouldn't have made a difference. Most small spaces really close within the first 3 years, and if not within the first 3 years, then in the first 5 years. Yeah, that's kind of really statistics, So, and I did not know the answer to that before earlier too, but I guessed that wasn't a catastrophic success of some sort, but more like the usual
Would have been nice,
kind of
but no.
right. Trickling out of things, so to speak. Yeah.
I will say that when I had the gallery, ArtNet just started. And I was one of the first galleries on ArtNet. And it actually worked out very well that I met a client that I worked with for a few years who I never met. We would just go back and forth by email or over the phone. I would send him a box of small pieces. He would say, I like these two. I had his credit card information, and then he would just mail me back the other pieces that he didn't want, and I'd pull down. So that was every few months I made a couple of $1,000.
Amazing. That's not that happen now either.
Well, it's still
not the same way.
But
Yeah.
That was only one story out of 30 years that I can tell you about. That was that easy and simple. It never met the person. I never had to worry about a check being missed or something like that.
So did you at that time, because this is interesting, of course, simultaneously to what we're talking about in that time, of course, the internet became very strong, and internet marketing and sales started, not crazily yet, but still, a lot of platforms sprung up, and then there was the internet bubble that burst also. So did you think though that this could be like an alternative for you, that you could go entirely digital or sort of like generate sales only this way via any kind of platforms that would?
No, I know some people who do the great deal digitally, but it doesn't interest me. Again, more interested in the art and doing things. If I just wanted to sell stuff, I wouldn't be organizing shows and doing all sorts of things. I would just be selling art, and that's it. I would be making that decision again, curating or just selling, and there wouldn't be any curating or writing referrals.
Right. You would go into the art business. Yes, yes. That's what you and I have in common. Sometimes to our territory.
That's great.
Yes.
And go on to the next sale, and that's it.
Right. So, and then there was 2000. Is that when Scope started, 2000, or was it 2001?
Well, the first scope was in 2002,
Okay.
and that was at the Gershwin Hotel. And we had 22 exhibitors.
I was one of them. Was the Gershwin the first one? There was, I think there was a Scope slated, and then there was 9/11 in Miami.
Yes.
Is that what happened? I don't remember.
Well, that was something that was thrown up by other people, and it was called Fast Forward.
Oh,
And I think that happened, but that, because of 9/11, Basel canceled.
right.
So, but that wasn't.
Right.
That was
Okay.
whatever.
So the Gershwin Hotel, yeah, I remember. It was cozy. And we were a small bunch.
Yep.
Yes, yes. Exhibiting in these rooms. Yes. I will never still want to exhibit in this. It was, yes.
And it was a lot of fun and a lot of work. And the first one we decided almost immediately, let's do Miami.
Well, yeah, and then fast forward never really took off, right? Yes. Yes. Yes, Scope, everybody knows, of course, Scope, right? Scope Outfir by now is a whole different animal.
Yes.
Scope Outfir was like, in the beginning, it was like NADA, in a way. Right?
Yeah,
A bunch of dealers, a lot of people who were later at NADA started at Scope. Yes. Yes, and a lot of artists showed there, and curators, and some very young galleries, also of alternative spaces. And it was really nice.
No,
First few editions were really good.
Yeah. We wanted to create a whole different scene. We didn't want to create just a marketplace, which is why we always mix things up. That's why when Nancy Hoffman said, can I possibly participate in Scope? I was like, yeah, it was a presentation. And because I thought it was exciting that this gallery that's been around for, by then, 40 years or whatever, and just is known to showing Frey and a few other people, that she was like, I want to reach a new audience, a younger audience, and I want to show different artists than what everybody knows that I want. And she actually submitted somebody that was pretty good.
I remember Nicole Clark's for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did
Yeah.
there too.
Yeah.
So, but that was the idea. At first, we wanted to mix things up so that there would be an independent curator next to a young gallerist, next to a gallery that's been around for 40 years, and some artist projects that was very different from the art fairs that were happening.
Yeah, were there any outfits like this before? Because I don't even really recall.
I mean, there's the original Armory.
Yeah, but I mean, like, such a young thing, like, the original Armory is a whole different. No? Yeah. But in the 90s?
In the 90s, that was the only one that was happening.
Right.
The original Armory.
Yeah, you mean the Armory in the Chelsea Hotel? No, not the Gramercy.
Gramercy.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, that was the only one at the time, and by the time we started doing Scope, they had already become established as
Yes,
the
okay.
Armory.
Yes. Okay, so they were sort of because this was a really, I remember the early 2000s were a fun time. There are all these then, of course, more and more of these now called satellite fairs emerged. That's how NADA started, of course, too. And NADA spun off like big time, and then came Hulls, exactly, etc., etc. And but so the first 3 years it felt very genuine. How long were you involved in Scope?
3 years, 4 years, something like that. I mean, the year before, in terms of organizing and planning it, and then at least 3 or 4 years of actually organizing it, and then a year or two as just an exhibitor.
And how did this come about? Did you meet Alex Hübschmann somewhere?
Well, I knew Alex and Peter Ceres from Rare Gallery, and at that point I was just, they, as people know, I'm always wandering around at the galleries doing some sort of event or a thing like that, and talking to various people about putting something together. And I kept on asking anybody if they wanted to organize a fair with me. And Alex and Peter were the first ones to say yes. Everybody was like, well, Rob, you're always organizing something, so you just go ahead and do it. So that was also why we were able to quickly put together Scope, because I was already asking a bunch of people, and I said, a few months later, okay, we have this fair called Scope. Are you going to participate or not? So.
Yeah, that's, I don't know if you all remember Rhea on 14th Street at first. Well, yeah, with Peter and Alex. Yes, they were good at delegating.
And that's how it all just came about. And like I said, we knew everybody.
Yeah.
And I was asking people to participate. And that's when everybody said yes. And we just put it together.
And there you had your new job in exhibitors relation.
Yeah.
And that was a job you maintained for like a decade or so, at least, if not longer. I mean, up to now, in a way.
Well, continuously,
Yeah. And you enjoyed that. I can imagine you enjoyed that kind of aspect of it. Yeah.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
And the whole beginnings of Scope was, like you said, a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, since it was only a couple of us at first running it and things like that.
Right.
So it was good.
But then, obviously you didn't stay with Scope. Scope is still around, of course Scope has changed tremendously. Peter also is not around anymore and hasn't been for a long time, or in a long time. But what happened with your relationship there? Or, I mean, was it your decision to just sort of branch out to other things?
I mean, I wanted to do other things, and Alexis wanted to turn Scope into a bigger art fair, and that just didn't interest me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I didn't want to be just dealing with exhibitor relations, because that would have been a situation where I don't know if I would have kept up being a dealer/gallerist sort of person. I don't know. I might have had to make that decision again.
Mm-hmm.
And that time I didn't want to do it.
Right. And you kept sort of like at least the path in terms of like dealing with other fairs,
Right.
becoming part with getting involved with other fairs was probably not only business relations, right? Did you do other things?
Oh yeah, it depends on the fairs. Fairs have asked me to work on media or bringing collectors or other sort of event things, besides getting exhibitors.
Yeah.
So, and that just rolled into another part of the performance or installation that I'm doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Scoba, for instance, they always had these like incredible sections where they did like great installation art and sculpture, and I mean, that was actually also fun. I remember that. And they made an effort sort of like doing that, and I don't know if you were like force behind that too. That I don't know.
That was early on. That was what we wanted to do, not just have 200 exhibitors putting out all their wares and it just being a pure marketplace.
Right. But then there was the other track. You were somewhat affiliated with Nurture Art.
Well, in the 90s, a friend of mine, another curator, was involved in Nurture Art, and that's how I got involved. And we were all working together, and because of my experience running Ward Massey and dealing with the board of directors there, I got more involved not only in organizing the exhibits, but also the development of the board in trying to bring something more about. And there again is a situation of a young nonprofit, so those of us on the board not only made the decisions, but hung the work. Or we decided who to have an exhibit, or which curator to have an exhibit. So,
Yeah, Nurture Art was a really strong non-profit, even though small, but yeah, and very well known. And yes, and of course you curated Karen in the show here, and and someone else too. I don't know. Only Karen, Karen Master. Yes.
Karen's one of the main
Right.
figures.
Yeah.
And because of her, later on, when I was just on the board, or I wasn't even involved on a hands-on way with Nurture Art, but I was still involved. Karen and I were always discussing what to do and what not to do, and I was always helping out with benefits and fundraisers and buying things and whatever else.
Right. And then there was writing.
Right.
Yeah. And that's something you're still doing. You've been doing now for quite a while.
Right.
Yeah. But it's basically, what is it, art criticism? You also help artists sometimes, right? With essays?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't write too many essays, but I do that or help them write their bios or other things, or artist statements and things like that. And I don't think or consider myself a critic, because I'm just writing. I don't, I'm trying to be more immediate and about the experience than delving into a whole art history like that, the polemics of the art and how it relates to something that happened in the 1700s. That I leave to the critics and the art historians.
Art writer with an art history degree.
That just doesn't interest me, so I stay away from doing that. And as we were talking earlier, writing is a difficult gig. And so I spend only the time that I want to write on artists and exhibits that I want to write about. And actually, Jeff Wright, who's doing the reading on Sunday, when he had Cover Magazine.
That's on the 29th, not this Sunday, yes.
When he had Cover Magazine, he was like, Rob, you want to write something? I need writers, so Jeff gave me my first writing assignments in 6.
And he is an artist, writer,
Yeah,
right?
he's more
Publisher,
as a writer and
publisher,
publisher.
yes. Probably many of you know them too. Sure. Also an East Villager. Yes. So that brings us very close to, actually there's another thing to it. And you and I, of course, living in the same city and at the same time, this has been also quite a ride, whether you are in the art world or not, in terms of all the happenings at that time you were in the art world, in the world, or in our times. And so we mentioned the internet bubble that affected, of course, many people, and not just people in the art world, but it affected people greatly in the art world. Because what I remember is people invested crazily in all kinds of rubbish, wasn't even, right? I mean, must say it like this, people are just, they're frantic. There was a frenzy, yeah. And did that affect you? I mean, other than, you think that closing the gallery had something to do with that?
I mean, maybe if I toughed it out or decided to do something else, maybe, but it really influenced scope. Because we were able to like attract so many collectors so fast and so prominent collectors too. So that really boosted scope because we were known not as a place to go see something, but you could buy all sorts of stuff and people bought.
Which is interesting because that was after the first internet bubble in a way, because that was after 9/11 when things then slowly picked up again, I guess, and then there was another frenzy, which got us more into the what you call the Great Recession.
Right.
Yes, in 2008. Yeah. And so these ups and downs in the art world, and then some of them also very tragically, by somewhat triggered by 9/11, of course, they, I think, have affected us all greatly, all who are in the art world, whether artists or
After 9/11, I wrote a review or something for, I think it was Tim and Celesta. And the editor called me up and was like, Rob, you need to work on this. And I was like, is that bad? And he was like, yeah, it's not your best work. But that was, I probably handed that in a week or two, maybe more, after 9/11. And I just took it back and played with it for a few days and then sent it back in and was like, okay, this is, much better. But that affected it. So, yeah.
And also we are kind of used to it in New York, I guess, that, there are these like commercial ups and then there are the commercial downs. It doesn't matter what we are doing, here in town, and then of course 2008 was quite a ride, I think, for pretty much everybody. Because it was such a kind of, crazy, free fall of things. So, and of course the art world very much contracted at that time or shortly after. And
very much so.
Yeah, and you were at that time working a lot with the Outfirs, right? Is that true? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just before, just during, the recession. I was working with a lot of fairs and a number of artists.
And that was also total frenzy. Like there was one art fair after the other. Yes, census art fairs, and then of course most of them had to go away. That was unsustainable, especially then after what happened in 2008. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but by 2011, things were starting to get stronger and better, and that's in the same way I started working with more fairs by then, or in 2012, something like that, because the economy and the world situation was getting better, so there was more cash available, and people just felt more comfortable traveling, spending, things like that.
Right.
But yeah, we could see the big difference in like 2012 as things kept going back to the way they were. Right.
But now really happens again as it happened before in terms of, I feel like the Outfir Frenzy, the experience in the same way. I mean, there is a whole different approach now, I think. I think there may be as many art fairs, but I think they had to kind of like somewhat to figure out more how they can be sustainable. Well, before it was literally, I mean, like with everything else, like people just opened up shop.
Yes.
And, and tried to sell anything to anybody, so, and apparently there was an abundance of buyers and participants and, interested
The
people.
fair that I know that didn't happen was, I was giving a talk one time, and a group of artists came up and asked me, how did you make Scope happen? Why did you do it? Weren't you scared? And I was like, well, what are you talking about? We just, knew a bunch of dealers like ourselves and a bunch of collectors, and we knew how I had all the media contacts to get us free advertising, and they were like, "Oh, but didn't you talk to a lawyer?" And I was like, "Why would you want to talk to a lawyer at the beginning of a business?" It's all about risk management and covering your ass and everything like that. I was like, "Why talk to a lawyer before you have any real thing?"
Right.
And so then got so scared that talking to a lawyer and setting up separate bank accounts and who's going to be vice president and a company and this, that, and the other thing, and then you got to have this sort of insurance. I was like,
Yes.
but how? Why did you even think of going to a lawyer? And they were like, "Oh, really?"
Yeah, those were not the times. Not as much. Yes.
No, I mean they knew how to make art, but they didn't know how to run a business, or not even run a business, but just they had no idea how to do it. And yeah.
Different.
Yes. I know. I was, when they said that we went to a lawyer first. Right, I didn't understand that. So that's
Yeah, then everything stops with the lawyers.
right. Yeah.
No money left.
You gotta pay a lawyer for something that we're not gonna have any money about.
Anyway, but now, okay, we had another very kind of dramatic worldwide event, the pandemic. Fast forward. You and I spent a lot of time together during the pandemic, and a few of our friends, and a lot of time at LICHTUNDFIRE. And so these times really kind of they have an impact, don't they? I mean, not just yeah. And I feel they shape you no matter what, in a sense. And in terms of like you're kind of forced to think about what you want from your life, or what you want in this world, or whether you want it in New York City, and it doesn't have to be on the Lower East Side or in the East Village or whatever. And so you decided, maybe not coming out of the pandemic, but still shortly after, and we also know it's not that the pandemic is over, still with us, you decided to put on this show. Someone said, "Oh my God, Robert put on this show. Does it mean that he's retiring now?"
As I had a discussion with someone not too long ago, I don't get the idea of retiring. Why retire to do something that you want to do? Why not,
But something you enjoy, yes. You retire on the other things.
Yeah,
Yes.
I just don't understand that. So, didn't make any sense to me, which is why I'm doing all this. Because I'm doing it, for myself on one hand. But yeah, no, if anybody's worried, I have no intention of retiring anytime soon.
This person was genuinely kind of concerned.
No.
Yeah.
No. I mean, if anything, this exhibit wasn't necessarily about the pandemic or anything like that. It was more of for those of you who don't know, last year I had a bunch of health issues, and the only thing that really made me feel any better was walking around my apartment seeing my own personal collection of, artworks that were gifts or pieces that I bought, or, an artist that I worked with years ago and really loved their work, but they disappeared. But before they disappeared, they left like half the exhibit with me. I had like 6 pieces of them, and they just, disappeared. So I have, and that's what, got me through some of the rougher times with my health issues. And I thought, I've been doing this for a damn long time. And then one day you started talking about some sort of legacy exhibit. And I thought that kind of made sense. And I then thought, had to, as I told those of you who were in the exhibit, this is kind of a retrospective of me and my life, but it's also about working together or knowing you guys or whatever situation that pertains. So it's, kind of a little bit of a mix-up or a mash-up in that sense. And that's what started it all, not me saying, okay, I'm going to go out with one last bang.
We hope not. If so, that this would be only the first thing.
As some of you know, with the health problems, I didn't need a doctor or anything for like 37 years. And then all of a sudden they needed blood and a bunch of others. So I'm hoping that, after all that stuff, I don't have to worry about it for another 37 years. And at which point then I'll be 94 and I'm perfectly happy to
not retire
and drop dead at the same time. So, I don't see what the difference would be. So that would be perfectly fine with me.
Well, on this note, even though I must say, of course, I'm very curious, but you brought that up already. No, the goal is not to retire, and you have many plans, even though maybe not concrete plans for the future. But there have also been already questions around the fact that people are thinking maybe there could be another In It for the Long Haul part 2.
Wait a minute.
Longer.
Just longer haul. Nice title.
Never say never, but I don't know if I would necessarily. I could easily do the show again tomorrow, knowing so many artists, and thank you all for participating. Those who said yes, except for a handful of artists, everybody said yes right off the bat. So knowing, or at least in my contact list, having around 1,000 artists, I could do this again. And if in a couple of years I do this again and you have twice the amount of space.
Do we need twice as much space? I don't know.
I don't want to get too claustrophobic.
Too bad they got rid of that trailer from it.
Yes. You could have had the extension. Yes.
The annex.
Yes. Right. The annex, so much nicer than extension. Well,
that would have been fun.
yes. They took it down to
thankfully they took it down.
Yes. We are not mentioning what happened that day. But so with this, I think we should at least open it up to a couple of Q&As, if not more. Do you guys have anything to ask Robert or to contribute to the conversation?
With luck. I'm actually very curious, and you were talking a little bit about some of the business aspects of the art fair, and you were saying, well, here's what you put, but here in the last 3 or 4 months, the Armory Fair was sold to Freeze. I think that the Pier Show in Chicago also was sold to Freeze.
Yep.
So my question, one of the questions would be scope, or whether you have an art fair like that, but you have, how does it exist as an entity? Why couldn't somebody else come on and just say, oh, I'm going to have a scope art fair too? There has to be some kind of business agreement, arrangement, or something like that you would so you would have the rights, the sole rights to the name. And then in the case that this thing goes on for a few years and actually does become a kind of an independent entity, why shouldn't you be in the position like the people that were running the Armory Show and these other things to sell it and profit from all the work that you put in?
No, definitely, yes. You need all that business stuff. once you actually have something to make.
So are you saying that you made a mistake by not maybe doing that?
No.
Did you, were you able to feel like you benefited enough and? Got it.
Yes, we just didn't go to any lawyers or anything until we definitely knew that it was going to happen. You know.
So at some point you did end up going to lawyers, you got an LLC or all that, okay.
Yes, so that was done, but it wasn't the.
It wasn't the starting
point. No, that was not the start.
And did it exist as an independent thing that people could buy shares of or this or that?
No.
It's just a partnership?
Yeah, it's just a regular,
Okay.
nothing fancy.
Now, when you were involved with it for, I mean, just not as a director, but just in your various roles, and maybe involved with it for how many years?
5, so, give or take.
Well, you worked for like 2 or 3 months coming up yet, and then not ever.
Yeah, I mean, yes. You know, but it was worth doing both work.
And was it happening in Miami and then again in New York twice a year? Was that happening?
Well, the first one was May 2002 here in the city. Then we did Miami when Art Basel had their very first one.
Okay.
And then there was Basel, Miami, like Basel.
Yes. Well, we
Yes.
then went on to do the Hamptons, London, Los Angeles, and Basel, Switzerland, and I think that was it. So originally, by the time I was just an exhibitor and not even running it, there was what, 5 fairs a year, 4 short fairs a year? That's when that is a lot of work. And by that time we were, I was happy with it growing into 50, 60 exhibitors. But then, like I said, Alex wanted to do even more fairs and more exhibitors, and I was like, oh, I don't want a full-time job doing this. So
he really wanted a franchise.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yep. Any other questions? Oh,
Somebody else ask a question.
Yes.
Anybody else? Come on.
Yes.
Come on. Give more in the bricks. Come on.
Yes. Steve?
So, I'm still trying to understand the world of contemporary art, and what I've been, well, you're right, but I'm seeing here a lot of what I really, that's a measure of contemporary art. You got the sexual art here, we have multimedia. And I find it very interesting what we've chosen. It's not what we call a very strict kind of dialogue with the canvas. It's and not that it isn't, but there's a lot of ideas and concepts behind here, if I may. And that's what I think I'm seeing with contemporary conceptual art. I see a tinge of conceptualism, but still I see a lot of conceptual art where there's no experienced texture of the surface, which I think is important personally, and I see that everybody here kind of one way or another has that romance between the texture of the surface and the medium itself in one way or another. I see a lot of contemporary art where it's so conceptual, it's almost beside the point.
It's so smooth, so shiny, so pretty in a sense. There's but I guess being an old-fashioned New Yorker, as we say, there's no dirt to it, so it just doesn't, it's not right.
I congratulate you on that, because it seems like you touched on that. Everything is kind of has a fascinating choice, but you can still lose yourself in the, God forgive me, the technique, the facility.
I think that's very important. That whether you're a master at it and can do amazing things, or you're struggling with it, it's having that technique and that ability and all of that, which I think is very important, but it's also been, I completely contradict myself in the exhibit by having Rick Purdy's piece here,
Right.
which is he designed an algorithm to create that painting. And right here with the Walter Robinson's piece, which is he just plugged some suggestions into a computer, the AI generated it, and then it went to another computer printer and printed it out.
But we still have texture.
But even visual texture.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Sure.
Yes, John.
I have a question for you. I agree with the last question about the visual interest as opposed to purely conceptual interest in the show. I think it's an exciting aspect of it. I just wanted you to speak about the theme of the show, the sort of in it for the long haul, because I sort of found talking to a lot of artists that I knew, I had seen in a long time, that sort of theme kept coming up of that people who are still decades on making work have not sort of achieved some kind of celestial status where they can make a living off their work, but they're still doing it, in various degrees for the love of it. I'm curious, you often think about maybe artists doing that, but I want to hear you speak about people like yourself and maybe Christian who are still working on the other side or other roles in the art world, doing it for the long haul. I'm curious.
Right. Well, like I said, for me, talking to quote-unquote normal people with a 9-to-5 job, I have no understanding of that, and the concept of retirement just, doesn't make sense to me. And that's in branching out the thinking of this exhibit. I purposely chose people that I knew had been working at it for years, whether they became hugely successful or haven't. That's not the point. It is being like me, you're in it for the long haul, regardless of whether you make $1 billion or you only make a penny. And that's what I was looking for. And there were specific people that, as I went through my contacts, that there was more than a few artists that I wanted to have in it, but I was like, I haven't heard from them in like 10 or 20 years, and either I couldn't find them online or I went to their website and their website hadn't been changed since 2015. So I, right then and there, I was like, okay, that's just not going to float, I'm not known as being a terribly ruthless person, but somebody early on asked me who Bob Curcio was, and that was my dad, and at the end, he didn't make the cut. Sorry. But I had him in other exhibitions I've done over the years, so that's good to know. So in selecting the artists and selecting the work, it wasn't necessarily about where they are in their career, or again, there are some people in the show that are early on in their career. That's also how I like doing things, mixing things up in that sense. But that's it for me in that sense. So it's not that the exhibit has some sort of grandiose theme and, that sort of thing. That doesn't interest me either. It was meant to be more of the celebration of just knocking out good stuff.
And yet, Stephen is right, there's a certain aesthetic here also, of course. That's Robert Curcio's aesthetic, because in the end you also picked the work. First of all, you picked the artist to work with a long time ago, or some of them, and then you picked the particular works for the show. And whether you didn't, consciously or maybe semi-consciously or totally conscientiously, so it tells your story and it shows your aesthetic. And there may be some exceptions or whatever, but the overarching kind of aesthetic is texture. There is, I guess, a lot of mark making and just
It's
tactile stuff.
Even whether it's the video or the photograph, Simon Johan's photograph, or other things. It's made.
Right. Right. So, a lot of painting. Yeah. Yeah.
Robert, I met you through Noah Becker, and I was curious how you met Noah Becker, what your relationship with him was.
How did I meet Noah?
I mean, Noah is an artist, and he's also a writer. He's very similar to you, and he struggles in a certain way that's similar to you, and similar to your experience in life.
Yep, and yes,
And he's very talented musician. So I was curious about your relationship with him, when you met him, or how you met him.
I'm not sure how or when we met. I don't remember. All I do know is that yes, I like his work and I've supported his, not only his artwork, but his music, and unfortunately he was one of the people who had to say no. I wanted him to be on the show too. And I would imagine I first met him either as an artist or me being a writer. I think, yes, once I was looking for other places to get my writing out, and I think somebody suggested, why don't you talk to Noah? And I think that's how it was, if you can say, with Noah, a more professional exchange at first, in terms of, here I'm a writer, do you want to post this or not?
Well, don't you think it's also curious that I think he had a very outstanding idea with his writing, with his digital journal or newspaper, and he withdrew from that. I think he was very affected by the pandemic. I think he was very turned off by being in New York for a while, and he needed to withdraw.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
What is the range of time in that these pieces were produced that are yours?
The majority of the work is all within the past few years. There's nothing that I can think off the top of my head that might be really from the 90s or something like that. I don't think there's... Although Tote's piece, I think, is 95. And so I think that might be the earliest piece on the there. I think.
Which one is that, Rob?
The sculpture in the plexi grid tree.
I have a question. What other curatorial projects are you planning?
I am doing a kind of portrait show in Toronto in the spring, and that's all I got at the moment because I've been a little preoccupied.
Is there like a sub-theme in the portrait show or a slant to the portrait?
We haven't gotten to that point yet. It's portrait with a lot of question marks as to what we're really going to do with the exhibit.
mostly paintings or drawings, or you're not showing?
Not sure yet. I mean, in general, as you know, and as I've said, I like mixing up exhibits. So it's not just a painting show or a this show. So I would be bringing that idea in general to the exhibit, but also in terms of talking to visitors and just wandering around in here myself during the day. I see like 4 or 5 other exhibits that I could come out of this. So
Great.
maybe.
Yeah. Do you get your ideas for curatorial projects just by that process, just by looking at other people's work?
A lot of times, yes. I start making the connections in my head, and things come out. Or sometimes, like when we did When Night Falls, you know, that was very much in my mind about the business. We organized it during the height of the pandemic.
Our first show after it has been closed for months, right?
So we basically organized it during the pandemic, and for me, the idea, you know, we had talked about doing an exhibit. We thought, oh, do a night exhibit just for the hell of it, and then it developed for me that, you know, that the night became so eerie and weird here in New York City, which is, you know, 24/7, and all of this, that the night seemed to come down, which also in an odd way, since you asked the question, harkens back to your exhibit at my gallery back in the 90s, which was, what the hell did I call it? Night Falls or Falling into...
It falls into height.
Yeah, Falls into Height.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was based on a poem. I think it was Octavio Paz.
Something like that. And we came up
Falls
with
into
that.
Height. That was a
Yes.
great title.
And I wanted that sort of same feeling when we did the night exhibit, because I was, you know, to me, just doing an exhibit called Night or About Night, and it seems a little boring. About
Mysterious.
so, you know, to make it more interesting.
That was a very nice exhibition. Yeah. Very different mediums and from abstraction to figuration and everything in between. It's very nice. Yes. Good show. Yes. Yeah. I think they got a review even.
Yeah, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Good.
So, that always helps.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you want to ask anybody here, Robert? Since you might know everybody pretty much or this is the time. You can roast them.
Well, then. No, I think we'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Another question? Otherwise, I would say let's go to the next part of the evening and have some refreshments. No?
Yes.
Or
I got something for the, as long as we're
go the way.
in the long haul. We've talked about a lot of things, the neighborhoods that have changed, the way that the art fairs have sort of changed the art market, the pandemic and all these things. So, for a couple of people that have been in it for the long haul, what would you see as the greatest challenge and the greatest opportunity for creativity going ahead for the people that have been for the long haul? Now,
We'll take that one.
It was you.
There are a lot of opportunities, whether you're starting out or even a mid-career artist. Art fairs being one of them, specifically now in the last 15 years, art fairs are no longer taboo, a shameful thing to do, and it's actually a very good thing to do because an artist will actually get an idea of what being in the business is really like. You know, I always, when I've talked to students, I've always said, go intern at your school's gallery. That's how I started. You'll start to learn and see how the business and the relationships really work and how completely screwy it all is. So I would say artist art fairs is one of the better things. There's a lot going on online, and that's good, bad, there too.
And the ugly.
Yeah. There, again, you gotta, if an artist in this day and age still thinks that they can stay in their studio and play with an artist and be discovered and all that, yeah, it happens once every 50
People win
years
the
or
lottery.
10 years. It does happen, but if you're waiting for your career to happen that way, you've got nobody else to blame except yourself. Because whenever I've done anything or artists ask me, oh, isn't a gallery supposed to do that? I'm like, wait a minute, it's your life, it's your career. If you're gonna blame the gallery, well then, you're gonna blame your dog too at the same time. And that's,
I think that's so true. I think that, really, now I'm answering it too. I think but that relates to everything you do and whoever you are. You gotta take agency. That doesn't mean that you have to be an expert in everything. That doesn't mean that you can do everything. You need help, you need people. You have to somewhat delegate also or outsource, but if you don't take agency of your own destiny or of whatever you want to do, that in the end you only have yourself to blame. And I think this is now more important than ever. Because this, of course, there used to be one that only also applied to very few people when the artist was sort of the prodigy. But this one is definitely obsolete in this world, and everybody expects everybody to kind of just, take agency, I think, no matter what you do, yeah.
Well, and I'm sure you've done it too, when I was more of a dealer and a gallerist, if I went to somebody's studio and I said, how many pieces have you sold in the past 6 months? Then they're like, well, I'm not really selling. I just want to paint. I'm like, okay, next person. I mean, yes, it's great that you're in your studio, but if you can't sell your own work or have people interested in your own work, well, that's just going to make my life and job more difficult. Yes, my job as the gallerist is to sell and all that, but you got to get something to work with. And if you don't have anything to work with, why should I work with you?
True. Well, guys.
Anybody else?
Anybody, you want to continue? I think we want to drink, no matter what.
So you can talk, I'm going to let him know. Thank you. Jen, would you like to sing a thing?